Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon, Head Department of English, VSSG College, Kanpur. We are presenting a paper on linguistics, and this module number 18, Phrase Structure, Verb Phrase, has been written by Dr. Jabba Kusum Singh of A&D College, Kanpur. In this module, the reader is required to have familiarity with the trends of the English generative grammar. To familiarize the reader with English linguistics and phrase structure, this module discusses the different types of verb patterns and phrases. The present module discusses in detail the different types of verb patterns, thereby highlighting the verb phrases. It shall render information about infinite and non-finite verbs. It shall also explain citing examples. Exercises for practice shall help the students to gain expertise in the subject. The module shall consist of multiple choice questions to enable the readers to practice. It shall also contain detailed questions on VP. Bibliography shall act as a pinch of salt in food to enhance the knowledge of the learner about verb phrase and verb patterns. In the traditional explanation of the structure of a sentence, we find a distinction between transitive and intransitive verbs. A transitive verb is one that occurs with an object, as in the girl ate an apple. An intransitive verb is one that does not in the context occur with an object, as the girl ran fast. We say the two forms transitive and intransitive are the subcategories of verb. Here we say that verbs in English are subcategorized concerning the function of taking or rejecting direct object. A detailed look into the structure of English verb phrase shows that English verbs can be subcategorized into a large variety of functions which enter into the structure of verb phrase, such as place. The boys kept the book there. This there shows the place. Manner. The player played well. The player played in what manner? Well. Then the duration, the baby slept for a long time. So baby slept for a short time or for the long time, this duration is represented, and so on. Each of these functions is said to subcategorize the category of verb. These subcategorizations of verbs govern the construction of verb phrases in a language. The subcategories, which are usually posited, do not form watertight compartments because it happens that there are overlaps, or more technically what is known as an intersection of subcategories, when for instance the same verb will function as transitive on one hand and intransitive on the other. Like for example, he reads or he reads a book. There is in one sentence we don't have any object, while in the other we have the object, a book. Famous linguist Noam Chomsky pioneered transformational grammar and brought about a new way of looking into the grammatical studies. This theory of transformational grammar later on developed as generative grammar. There are a number of versions of generative grammar currently practiced within linguistics. A contrasting approach is that of constraint-based grammars. 1950s brought about a worth mentioning change in the world of language studies, as it introduced a new conception of studies in linguistics. This was the decade when the famous linguist Noam Chomsky pioneered transformational grammar and brought about a new way of looking. This theory was very prevalent in his time and became very famous as well. It is a linguistic theory that considers grammar as a system of rules that generates exactly those combination of words which form grammatical sentences in a given language. This term, generative grammar, originally used in relation to the theoretical linguistics of grammar, and which was developed by Noam Chomsky, who had focused on the study of syntax, but has also addressed other aspects of a language's structure, including morphology and phonology. Constraint-based grammars include certain versions of dependency grammar, head-driven phrase structure grammar, lexical functional grammar, categorical grammar, relational grammar, link grammar, and tree adjoining grammar. In stochastic grammar, grammatical correctness is taken as a probabilistic variable rather than a discrete, like yes versus no property. Chomsky and his followers, when talked of phrase structure, or in other words, rewriting of rules, they suppose that if A is a sentence, then it can be further separated into two subconstituents B and C. To clarify it further, a sentence consists of a noun phrase followed by a verb phrase. Again, it can be subdivided into a noun phrase consisting of an optional determiner followed by noun. This is also not only means that a noun can be preceded by an optional adjective phrase and followed by an optional prepositional phrase. The most recent is the minimalist program, from which Chomsky and other generativists have argued that many of the properties of a generative grammar arise from a universal grammar popularly known as UG, which is innate to the human brain rather than being learned from the environment. There are a number of versions of generative grammar currently practiced within linguistics. A contrasting approach is that of constraint-based grammar, where a generative grammar attempts to list all the rules that result in all well-formed sentences. Constraint-based grammars allow anything that is not otherwise constrained. Constraint-based grammar that have been proposed include certain versions of dependency grammar, head-driven phrase structure grammar, lexical functional grammar, categorical grammar, relational grammar, link grammar, etc. In this connection, when Chomsky and his followers talked of phrase structure, or in other words, rewriting of rules, they suppose a different thing that is shown on your screen. Again, it can be subdivided into a noun phrase consisting of an optional determiner. Beginning with the sentence symbol S and applying the phrase structure rules successively, finally applying replacement rules to substitute actual words for the abstract symbols, it is possible to generate many proper sentences of English. Thus, it is clear that a single sentence has more than one syntactic unit, and verb phrase is one of many such units. It is a syntactic unit composed of at least one verb and its dependents, objects, complements and other modifiers, but not always including the subject. Thus, in the sentence, a tall woman put the ring hurriedly in the box. In this sentence, the words put the ring hurriedly in the box are a verb phrase. It consists of the verb put and its dependents, but not the subject, a tall woman. A verb phrase is thus a predicate of a sentence as per the traditional grammatical studies. Subcategorization leads us to the notion of phrases as constituents in terms of their functions. This further leads us to what is known as immediate constituent analysis to find out the constituent element of phrases. You can call it as an important aspect of phrase structure. In phrase as a set of rules which govern the grouping of the noun phrase and the verb phrase in a sentence, we make use of labeled brackets or phrase markers to express the grouping of the phrase. As on your screen, you can see the sentence, the woman went to the shopping mall, and you can see according to the bracketing done how this is represented. The same construction receives a tree diagram in the following kind. The tree generates the following phrase structure rules. Sentence leads to NP plus VP. NP1 is determiner plus N. VP verb past plus preposition plus NP2. then NP2 leads to noun. The three rules above generate one tree or a labeled bracketing. Verb is generally distinguished between finite and non-finite. The non-finite verbs are the infinitive, present and perfect, with or without to, the present and past participles, and the gerund or verbal noun. Now you can see in this list of the auxiliary verbs, we have non-finite forms as well as finite forms. In the infinitive present past participle, we see be, being, been, have, having, had, do, doing, done. These are all non-finite. When we come to finite, we have present and past tense both. Is, am, are, was, were, has, have, had, so on and so forth. Now in this video, when you will watch it, you will find that certain parameters of how to make a verb phrase will become clear to you. Do watch this video.
Okay, now we're going to analyze quickly the first sentence of our exercise. We received exercise A. The children laughed when the clown fell. Okay, so if I go straight to rule number 1, it says that a sentence has two options. Okay, see it as an imaginary line between them. Okay, either it has a sentence modifier and a sentence core, or it has a subject and a predicate. In this case, for the children laughed when the clown fell, there is no sentence modifier. There's not a word that modifies the whole sentence. So I cannot use the first line. So I jump it. I go to the second line because I know that in the sentence there is a subject and there is a predicate. Now, look at rule number 3, because I am in subject now. I need to find out what's inside of a subject. Well, subjects are composed of noun phrases. Now, go to rule number 4. What does the noun phrase have? Noun phrase, similar to the sentence rule, has 2 lines. So you can either go with line number 1 or with line number 2. Option 1 or option 2. Option 2 says that there should only be a pronoun. In this case, is there a pronoun? No, it says the children. So I'm not going to use option number 2. I automatically go in my mind, okay, there is no pronoun. I can go straight to the noun phrase option number 1. So the option number 1 says that there could be a determiner. There can be up to 3 determiners. There can be an adjective phrase. There has to be a noun. The noun could be plural. And there could be a prepositional phrase. In this sentence, what do I have? Do I have a determiner? Yes, I do. I have the. The is the determiner. Do I have a noun? Yes, I have the noun children. But wait, children is plural. What's the singular form of children? Child. So that's what I put under the letter N. Followed by a line that indicates that this noun is in plural. Notice that the line does not come from the noun, it comes from the noun phrase, okay? Telling me that in this noun phrase, we're talking about a plural. Now we work with the second part. We finish with the children. Now, as soon as we see laughed, we know, okay, now I'm starting into the predicate. So the predicate will be composed of laughed when the clown fell. Now, the predicate. Is there a rule for predicate? Yes, there is. Go to rule number 7. The rule says that there is an auxiliary, a verb phrase, and an adverbial. Okay? Do we see auxiliary and verb phrase? Well, the word laughed. What is that? Well, you automatically think it's a verb. Okay, very good. It's a verb. But since we haven't discussed how auxiliary and verb phrase, what are they composed of, we do this little triangle and we leave it in laughed. Okay? Now, the rule for number 7 says that the sentence could have an adverbial. So imagine if the sentence had only said, the children laughed. Well, then you would have finished here. The children laughed. You would have left it there. There wasn't anything else, and that was your sentence. But the sentence doesn't say that. It says, the children laughed when the clown fell. So there is an adverbial. Now I have to decide, well, now I have to identify what type of adverbial. Is it an adverbial clause? Is it an adverbial phrase? Or is it a prepositional phrase? That's rule number 8. As you can see, rule number 8 gives me 3 options. I can't choose both or 3. I have to choose one. Remember, whenever you see these explanations, one on top of the other, it means that there are rules. Specifically, when you have these the corchetas, I don't remember the word in English. When you have these type of parentheses, it means that you have to choose one. You have to choose one. Okay, remember that. Now, what is this? Well, I have to decide. If you head out to the Chapter 5 PDF, the notes, it gives you on rule number 8 examples for each one. For adverbial clause, the boys left before their father could find them. Adverbial phrase, the boys work very quickly. Prepositional phrase, the boys eat lunch in the city. In this case, when you look at the sentence, it says, when the clown fell. When the clown fell. Let's look at rule number 9 for a moment. Rule number 9 says adverbial clause. It means it'll have an adverbial subordinator, like before, and then something else for then continuing the sentence. So let's see. Is the word when an adverbial subordinator? Yes, it is. It's similar to before. So this sentence, this part here, this adverbial is an adverbial clause. Now, adverbial clause has a rule, which is number 9. It says adverbial subordinator, then sentence. The adverbial subordinator here is the word when. Now we draw another line which sends us to the next section. Sentence. What's the rule for sentence? Yes, that's right. Go back to rule number 1. Rule number 1 gives me options. Sentence modifier, sentence core. There is no sentence modifier here. We're going straight to sentence, to subject and predicate. What is the subject of this part? The clown. That's right. Subjects in rule number 3 indicates that they need to be composed of noun phrases. What is a noun phrase? Noun phrase, we go to rule number 4. It could have a determiner, it can have an adjective phrase, it must have a noun, it can be plural, and it could have a prepositional phrase. If you look at the option number 2, it means that maybe this has a pronoun. Does it have a pronoun? No, it says the clown. It didn't say when he fell. It said when the clown fell. So I have to use the first option. So, the. What is the? Determiner. What is clown? The noun. Is it in plural? No. Okay, leave it at that. Now let's go to the predicate. The word fell. Well, the predicate in rule number 7 says that it has to have an auxiliary and a verb phrase. Guys, this part is easy. Triangle it and leave it with fell. We're done. There's nothing else. Nothing else to analyze right now until we get into more structure rules.
Now you must have understood what I wanted to explain, that verb phrase, what it is, and how you can just create a verb phrase in a sentence, and how you can recognize without any error the verb phrase. Let's move on to some interesting facts. When finites are not auxiliaries, they are sometimes anomalous and sometimes non-anomalous. There are differences between British and American usage. There are differences in British usage depending on the meaning of the verb. Have is both anomalous and non-anomalous according to its usage. Have got is used in American as non-anomalous, but in British English it is anomalous. The finites of do are anomalous only when they are auxiliaries or operators in the formation of the negative and interrogative and in the emphatic affirmative. When do is a full verb, the finites are non-anomalous. The model auxiliaries are shall, should, will, would, can, could, may, might, must, ought, needy, dare, and used are fixates of defective verbs. Shall, should, will, would, can, could, may, might, and must are always anomalous. Ought, always with to is anomalous in good usage but non-anomalous in substandard English. Need is used as a modal auxiliary anomalous without to. Need is also a full or lexical verb which is regular in every way. Like need, dare is also used both as a regular verb and as a modal auxiliary anomalous. The phrase used to is pronounced and the negative used to is pronounced. It is to be distinguished from the past tense of the verb use, which has the same spelling used but is pronounced in a different way. It must also be distinguished from used, that is pronounced meaning accustomed. I am used to doing such things. There are various kinds of formations, like formation of the negative, the formation of the interrogative negative, avoidance of repetition, questions, the emphatic affirmative, and adverb position. In order to learn and gain competence in the usage of verb in English language, it is essential for all students of English language to have knowledge of verb patterns. There are 25 verb patterns. The pattern 1 to 5 are of verb used intransitively and 6 to 25 are of verbs used transitively. Once again, I am showing you a video which will make these facts clear to you, and in this video you will come to know that what are the basic differences between transitive and intransitive verb, and when we just step by step, when we just constitute the verb phrase, what are the things to be taken care of and how we can make the most of it.
Sentences can be analyzed into hierarchies of constituents. This unit discusses the historical development of phrase structure systems from 1957 until today. Well, why 1957? Well, that was the year when Chomsky published Syntactic Structures, his first major influential work. Well, and today is influenced by his minimalist program and the discussion and alternations of what he published in 1997. The method of representing syntactic structure visually by the use of tree diagrams, also referred to as phrase markers, has a long tradition with a number of significant milestones. So as already mentioned, the first milestone, and we will illustrate this on the basis of one sentence, the first milestone was the year 1957 when Noam Chomsky introduced the first version of a phrase structure rule system, as you can see here. It was neither strictly binary as it is today, nor did it use intermediate category levels such as bar levels we know from modern systems. Before 1957, American structuralists such as Leonard Bloomfield or Zelig Harris suggested preliminary versions of hierarchical structures in linguistic analysis, thus predecessors of modern phrase structure systems. Let's look at the central properties of the 1957 system. Well, S, which stands for sentence, is the highest category. It consists of two central categories, the noun phrase and the verb phrase. The verb phrase itself consists of the verbal complex, so this would be the verb itself, well, and all optional and obligatory elements that are associated with it. So there is no distinction drawn between optionality and obligatory. So there is no distinction drawn between optional and obligatory elements such as adjuncts and complements. The auxiliary part in this model exhibits all grammatical aspects. So here it is. Well, this is not too remote from what we have today. It exhibits all grammatical aspects associated with the verb, tense, aspect, modality, etc. Let's look at the successor from 1965. Now, this version was published in Chomsky's influential book Aspects of a Theory of Syntax, and it was at a time referred to as the standard theory. Today, of course, it's no longer the standard theory, but in the 1970s, 1980s, it was referred to as such. In the standard theory, two major changes were introduced to the phrase structure rule system of 1957. First of all, we find the predicate now, or predicate phrase. Now, this is a new node. It consists of the auxiliary complex and the verb phrase. And the second very interesting new node was the operator node. Now, the operator contains a symbol for the sentence type. So the idea was that prior to generating the syntactic structure of a sentence, we have to determine what type of sentence it is that we want to generate. A declarative sentence, an interrogative sentence, an imperative sentence, a declarative sentence in the passive, a negative declarative sentence, and so on and so forth. So this operator nodes is, well, if you wish, an early realization of the spec-comp node in modern theories. Well, the next major step was published in Reflections on Language in 1976. However, one of Chomsky's disciple, Ray Jackendorf, was also very influential in the development of this first version of what they refer to as X-bar syntax. The idea goes back to Chomsky and Jackendorf, as I said, and a discussion of the representation of nominals. The intermediate categories, so we have something like a system like X double bar, X bar, and X. So this would be the intermediate category. This would stand for the highest category, XP, so that is the idea. The intermediate categories between XP and X, for example, between noun phrase and noun. So here we have such an intermediate category. Here is another one, here is one, and here is one. Verb bar. These intermediate categories are represented either by means of a real bar on top, or for reasons of simplicity, especially if you want to write these symbols, by means of an apostrophe. They filled the gap between phrasal and lexical categories. The resulting phrase structure system has been called X-bar syntax henceforth. Now, what was new in this system apart from this intermediate level? Well, we have a new node called complementizer. A node for all those elements that can be moved into sentence initial position, for example, WH elements like which and who, that, conjunctions, etc. Well, and we have, well, similar to the 1957 system, we have an inflection node, infill, which is filled with the inflectional properties of the verb. In English, these are all parts of the verb group except the main verb itself. Well, as we move on in time, in 1986, Chomsky published a book called Barriers. Now, moving on, the new system exhibits now strict binary branching and a change of the former top level node S bar into CP, complementizer phrase. So this is the complementizer phrase. And now we have strict binary branching and intermediate categories in all sorts of nodes. For example, new was the P bar node, which now filled the gap. It was simply forgotten in versions prior to that. Now also we have C bar, which is the equivalent of former S. So here this, well, is former S bar. We have IP, the inflectional phrase, that is the projection of infill. inflectional phrase. This is the, by the way, I forgot a bar here. This is the projection of infl. The verb phrase now contains just verb bar and an optional specifier which has been dropped here. So in items, in constructions like have just gone, just would be the specifier of a verb. Prepositional phrase have the typical X-bar structure, and infl is filled with the inflectional properties of the verb. Now, today's system is generally associated with X-bar syntax. No serious syntactic representation in generative grammar does not use X-bar syntax. However, we have now two different types of phrase. You can see them here. Type 1 and type 2. As a consequence of this, noun phrases can now be reanalyzed either as simple phrases, which would be here. So you have just the head and the specifier. Or as complex phrases, which would be here. So this would be number 2 and this would be number 1. Now note that the term noun phrase has been replaced by determiner phrase as a consequence of having complex determiners like a lot of, etc. A simple determiner phrase with a simple determiner and a noun would be number 1, and a complex determiner phrase with a noun phrase structure inside would be determiner phrase 2. So here we have the old noun phrase structure. Further changes concern the introduction of a general functional category and an extended daughter structure of I bar. So extended daughter structure would be here and I bar, to account for the morphological features of tense and aspect. So something like this. Now, several interacting arguments lend support to the postulation of the phrasal categories and the branching as presented here. These arguments can be subdivided into non-syntactic evidence, distributional evidence, and other syntactic evidence. The e-lecture phrase structure testing illustrates these arguments on the basis of various phrase structure rules.
Hope you must have enjoyed this video and gained some insight into this module. This will really help you to understand the module in a proper way. Thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala.